The envelope was thick, cream-colored, sealed with a gold sticker that said, "To our beloved son Kevin on your wedding day." I wasn't supposed to see it, but Mom had left it out on the kitchen counter next to her planner and my old coffee mug. The one that said "Number 1 daughter" chipped on the handle. I opened it without thinking. Not snooping. Just tired of being invisible in a house I never left. Inside was a notarized deed. The family house, ours since 1976, had been transferred to Kevin Parker. No conditions. No co-ownership. No mention of me. I stood there for a full minute, staring, rereading. Like the paper might change if I blinked hard enough. Then I heard it. Mom's voice coming in from the porch. "He's starting a family. He needs stability." A pause. "He's earned it, Diane. Lynn doesn't have those kinds of responsibilities." That was Dad. Calm. Final. Like they'd rehearsed it. I didn't walk outside, didn't confront them, didn't scream. I just turned back to the counter and picked up the deed again. The paper felt heavy, like a verdict, like a message: you were good enough to serve, but not to receive. The house I mopped after flu season. The gutters I cleaned after Dad's surgery. The freezer I stocked before every holiday. Gone. Gifted. Given away because I didn't wear a white dress or bear a child. I went upstairs, opened my closet, took down the manila folder marked tax files, Mom and Dad. 10 years of spreadsheets, bank transfers, home maintenance invoices, and a line from last spring's email. "Thanks again for managing our accounts, Lynn. We'd be lost without you." I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something colder. Clearer. I looked around my childhood bedroom, the one they still called yours even though it hadn't been mine in 20 years. The bedspread hadn't changed. The curtains still floral, but I had. That night I didn't cry. I drafted an email. Then I made an appointment with a lawyer. Quiet justice begins with documentation. They had made one thing clear. I was no longer part of the future of this family. So I decided I'd stop acting like I owed them mine. Would you fight back or walk away quietly? Where are you listening from? Has family ever made you feel replaceable? Comment your story below. You are not alone. Mom always said I was born sensible. Did my homework. Took care of my teeth. Paid off my first used car in 18 months. Kevin was born 11 years after me, unexpected, spoiled, and adored like he'd arrived to complete something I apparently hadn't. We lived in the same colonial-style house in Spokane my whole childhood. White siding, peeling green shutters. A front porch swing that creaked when Dad shifted his weight. Every Sunday was Mass at 8 a.m. followed by pancakes at Lorraine's diner. Then chores. I'd vacuum. Dad would nap. Kevin, once he was old enough, would disappear. By the time I turned 30, I was already the one driving my parents to doctor appointments, helping them apply for Medicare, updating their insurance policies online. No one asked me to, but no one else offered either. At 38, when I paid off my student debt and finally qualified for a mortgage on my own, Mom convinced me to delay. "It's silly to live in two places," she said. "You're always here anyway." I didn't push back. Not then. Instead, I kept showing up. Kept organizing their receipts in color-coded folders. Kept heating up their leftovers and buying Mom's special arthritis tea from that one shop downtown. Kevin. He floated from job to job. Retail roofing, something with crypto. For 2 years he lived in Portland and missed every family holiday. But when he moved back last spring, jobless, broke, and suddenly engaged, our parents acted like the prodigal son had returned from war. They bought him a used BMW. Offered to pay for the wedding. Cleared out Dad's study so he could get back on his feet. One evening, as I stood stirring a pot of soup in Mom's kitchen, she said, "Isn't it nice to have your brother home again? Things feel full." I blinked. I was their apron on, soup spoon in hand, but apparently invisible. I kept stirring. Kevin's fiancée Elise was poised, polite, and unbothered by my presence. She called me Linny like we were college roommates. She'd only known me for 3 months. And already she used my name like a nickname she'd earned. One afternoon, I found Mom and Elise flipping through bridal catalogs at the dining table. When I walked in, Mom quickly closed one. Linny, I thought you were at work. I was. Got off early. Elise smiled sweetly. We were just going over ideas for the centerpieces. Your mom wants something classic. I noticed the open wedding spreadsheet on Mom's laptop. Budget columns, guest counts. A row labeled house transfer gift. Deed finalized by April. It was mid-February. What's this? I asked quietly. Mom's eyes flicked to mine then away. Oh, it's just something your father and I wanted to do. Kevin and Elise are starting their life. We thought the house would be a good foundation. I couldn't respond. I just walked into the kitchen. Breathed slowly. The kettle whistled. That night I asked Dad directly, "Is it true? You're giving them the house?" He didn't look up from his paper. "It's the family home. Kevin will carry it on. You don't need a house to carry a legacy." Legacy. Like I was just the warm-up act for someone else's show. In the weeks that followed, Kevin stopped knocking before walking into my old room. Started calling my corner of the pantry temporary. Suggested Elise's cousin might like to move in post-wedding to help out. They acted like I was visiting. Not the woman who had cooked Thanksgiving dinner for 14 years straight. Even my name felt less real in that house, less permanent. I stopped putting on makeup. Stopped refilling the sugar jar. Stopped answering family group texts. No one noticed. Until one morning Mom asked if I'd mind helping Elise with her bridal shower invites. "I think you're the only one who knows how to work Canva," she laughed. I looked at her. Then at Elise, who was sipping coffee from my #1 daughter mug. "Sure," I said. But I saved every file I created under my own folder. Backed it up. Tracked every purchase I made. Receipts, hours, email threads, because something inside me had shifted. Not anger, not grief. Precision. I started writing everything down. The time I took off work to meet with their banker. The $300 I loaned Kevin for temporary tux deposits. The 2 weeks I spent consolidating their taxes. It was like I could see the final scene of a play no one knew I was writing. 3 weeks before the wedding, I came home to find my room painted beige. Not a soft cream or a warm almond beige, rental beige. The kind of color that says, "This isn't yours anymore." My bed had been pushed into the corner. Half my books were missing from the shelf. And there was a folding table set up where my desk used to be, covered in floral stationery and jars of pink ribbon. I stood in the doorway, hands still holding the groceries. "Oh good, you're home," Mom called from the hallway. Elise just needed a quiet place to work on the wedding favors. No apology, no mention of my things. I carried the groceries to the kitchen. Set the paper bag down next to a stack of catering brochures. Dad was watching the news. Kevin was on speakerphone with a DJ. No one looked up. That night I slept on the living room couch. The beige walls upstairs felt like a silent eviction notice. The next morning, Kevin offered me a coffee. "I know this whole transition is weird for you," he said, sipping from a brand new mug that said "Best Man Ever." "But Elise and I are happy to share. After all, we're family." I didn't respond. At work I started coming in early. I stayed late, ran reports that weren't due. I found excuses to be anywhere but home. Marcy, my closest friend in accounting, noticed. "You okay?" she asked one Thursday afternoon. I was staring blankly at a screen full of spreadsheets. "Just tired," I said. But she didn't buy it. "You still living with your folks?" I nodded. "Lynn, you're 46. You've worked since you were 22. They should be living with you." I didn't answer. That weekend I skipped Elise's bridal brunch. Didn't offer a reason, didn't send a gift. When I came home, a post-it was stuck to the fridge. "Can you not make this about you for once?" "Mom," I peeled it off slowly. Stared at the empty space it left behind. That night I found Elise and Kevin in the kitchen giggling over registry gifts. Your cousin Anna bought us a Vitamix, she squealed. Like the nice one. Kevin kissed her forehead. Just imagine the smoothies, babe. They didn't even pause when I walked in. I reached for the kettle. My hands shook. They didn't notice. But later as I went to pour tea I saw it. The mug. My mug. Number 1 daughter thrown in the trash, cracked into 2 jagged pieces. No one said a word. Not at dinner, not the next day. Not ever. On Monday I took a long lunch and walked into the family attorney's office. I didn't make an appointment, just showed up. Lynn Parker, I said to the receptionist. I'm here about the Parker property transfer that was filed last month. He raised an eyebrow. Are you the new owner? No, I said. I'm the one they forgot. She asked me to wait. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man named Howard Kirkland. His office smelled like leather and printer ink. Bookshelves lined with hardbound tax codes. A framed cross-stitch above his desk read, "Do things by the book." I'm not contesting the deed, I told him. I know it's done. He nodded. I just want to know what options I have, legally. He steepled his fingers. You were living in the home, contributing financially significantly, for years, and handling most of their financial management. Documented, I nodded. I have spreadsheets, emails, scanned receipts, and tax returns. He smiled just slightly. Let's talk. For the next hour we did. And when I left, he handed me a folder and said, You've been too quiet, Miss Parker. That tends to make people underestimate you. That night, I sat at my desk in the corner of the beige room. Elise had graciously returned the space and opened the folder again. One page stood out. A list of services I'd provided for free financial management. Home maintenance, in-home care during mom's recovery, filing of tax returns for both parents, administrative support for household assets. Howard had added an estimated dollar value next to each. I stared at the total. It was more than the appraised value of the house. I closed the folder. Saturday in silence. Outside, I heard Kevin's voice through the window. He was in the driveway showing Elise how to open the new BMW's sunroof. She deserves the best, he said. Elise giggled. Inside, I looked down at the folder in my lap, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't joy, it wasn't bitterness. It was the slow rising certainty of someone who had finally stopped waiting to be chosen. Someone who had chosen herself instead. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mom handed me a lavender envelope at breakfast. Bridesmaid schedule, she said, casually pouring her coffee. I didn't open it, just stared at the steam rising from my mug. The new one. Plain white. No label, you don't have to plan anything, she added. Just show up. And wear what Elise picked. What did she pick? Mom waved her hand. Something soft. Modest. You'll see. I opened the envelope upstairs. The dress was already ordered. Size 12. I haven't worn a 12 since 2010. I'm a 6. Sometimes 4. There was a note at the bottom. We thought a looser fit would be more comfortable for you. Elise wants everyone to feel relaxed and elegant. Elegant I could live with. Invisible I could not. I brought it up with Kevin that night. He was in the garage reorganizing Dad's tool chest like he'd lived here all his life. Can you just ask her to exchange it for my actual size? I asked, holding the paper. He looked over, wiping his hands on a towel. Lynn, it's just a dress. Elise didn't mean anything by it. Then she won't mind changing it. He hesitated. Look, you've been kind of tense lately. Mom thinks maybe you're feeling left out. Left out, I exhaled through my nose. She gave you the house, Kevin. He blinked. So my voice caught. I stepped back. You know what? Never mind. I turned to leave. He called after me. Maybe you should talk to someone, Lynn. You're holding on to a lot. That night I sat on my bed and stared at the spreadsheet I'd updated earlier. Line 46, $6,870. Account reconciliation 2019, 2021. My labor. My time. My life. All invisible. like the hemline of a too-big dress that would pool around my ankles while Elise beamed in white silk. The week of the rehearsal dinner, Elise's bridal shower was hosted at a country club just outside town. I wasn't invited. It's just her side, Mom said quickly. You know to make things simple. I nodded. Stayed home. Vacuumed the carpet. Washed the sheets in the guest room Elise had claimed. When I passed by the bathroom, I noticed something strange. My makeup bag was gone. In its place, Elise's prider. All her products. Her toothbrush. Her perfume, the one that smelled like peonies and powdered sugar. It sat on the sink like a declaration. By dinner, no one had mentioned the switch, so I did. Elise moved into the upstairs bath. Mom nodded. She needed more room. I live here, I said quietly. Mom smiled like I was joking. She's family now, Lynn. Make her feel welcome. At the rehearsal dinner, I was seated at the far end of the table, past Uncle Pete, past the college roommate, even past Elise's Pilates instructor. No one made a speech for me. I didn't get introduced. But I noticed how often I was glanced at. Not kindly, not cruelly, just assessed. Like someone they weren't sure belonged here anymore. When the dessert came, I stood up to leave. Mom caught my arm. You're not staying for the slideshow. What slideshow? She hesitated. Oh. Elise and Kevin put together a montage, photos, childhood stuff. It's sweet. I sat back down. The first few pictures were harmless. Kevin in a diaper. Kevin with a toy truck. Kevin at the beach. Then came high school. Graduation, prom. And not one photo of me. Not a single one. Not in the background, not beside him. Not at his birthdays. Just erased. My chest tightened. I'd taken half those pictures. I'd held the camera, organized the albums, saved the memory cards. When the lights came back on, Elise leaned over and whispered sweetly, "We just couldn't find any that worked." I didn't reply. But I remembered exactly which hard drive they were on. The one Elise had moved into the closet without asking. The one she now called storage. That night I pulled it out, plugged it into my laptop, and opened the folder labeled Family Events, unedited. There I was, holding Kevin as a baby, reading to him, standing beside him at Mom's 50th birthday party, carving pumpkins, unwrapping Christmas gifts, baking pies, years of presents, deleted in one curated click. I copied every image onto a flash drive. Then I opened a second folder. Parker Financial, backups, receipts, bank scans, spreadsheets. Then finally audio. One from Mom left on voicemail just 6 months earlier. "Honey, I need you to go through the tax letters again. I think Kevin threw something out. Oh, and don't tell him, but we're thinking of gifting him the house. He needs stability and you'll be fine. You've always been the reliable one." Reliable. A word that sounds like praise until you realize it's what people say when they don't plan to give anything back. I saved that too. Then I clicked record and began reading line by line from the spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, hours, unpaid work, grocery tabs, car repairs, holiday hosting. I didn't speak with rage, didn't dramatize it. Just read. Fact after fact. Line after line. Until I had built a narrative. One they couldn't erase. That night I slept deeply, for the first time in months. The morning of the wedding I woke before the sun. I'd barely slept, though I don't think anyone noticed. The house was already awake, Mom bustling in the kitchen, Kevin laughing somewhere downstairs. Elise's voice drifting through the hallway like a perfume I didn't choose. My dress had been steamed and laid across my bed. Still a size too big. Still lavender. Still not mine. I stepped into it slowly. No one helped, no one asked. In the mirror I looked like a placeholder. Someone meant to fade into the backdrop while others lived in the spotlight. The fabric hung from my shoulders like a borrowed roll. I pinned it at the sides, then sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, I thought about not going. Just walking out, leaving the whole thing behind. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for the USB drive. Checked that it was still inside my purse. Slipped it into the lining pocket. It wasn't time yet. Downstairs, Mom was arranging flowers. Her voice chirped instructions, brittle, bright, relentless. Lynn, grab those napkins, would you? And please don't forget the cupcakes from the fridge. Oh, and don't let Elise see them before the photographer arrives. I moved through the motions, poured punch, tied bows on the party favors, smiled. No one noticed how quiet I was. They only noticed I didn't cause trouble. At the church, I was positioned at the end of the bridesmaid line. Elise's cousin Jenna blocked most of me in photos. When the photographer asked us to turn slightly, Mom muttered behind him, "Just make sure Kevin's not standing too close to Lynn. She's not very photogenic with that lighting." I didn't flinch. I just adjusted my bouquet and looked straight ahead. My feet hurt. The shoes were new pinching. No one had asked my size. When the ceremony ended, I helped corral guests to the reception hall, tucked name cards into holders, refilled the water pitchers. At dinner, I was seated at the table near the exit, next to the DJ and someone's date who didn't speak English. During the toasts, I clapped at the right moments, raised my glass. Watched as Kevin stood beside Dad, eyes glossy with pride. He talked about second chances, how Elise made him want to be a better man, how lucky he was to have family that believed in him. Mom dabbed her eyes. Elise's parents beamed. No one looked at me. No one thanked me. I was there everywhere and completely erased. After dessert, I stepped outside. The air was cold, damp with early spring mist. I sat on a bench near the parking lot and took off my shoes. My toes were raw. The music inside pulsed through the ground, muffled by walls and champagne. I leaned back, closed my eyes. For a second, I thought I might cry, but I didn't. There was nothing left, only numbness. And resolve. I heard the door open behind me. Footsteps. It was Marcy. She must have come late, I hadn't seen her inside. "Hey," she said gently. "Mind if I sit?" I shook my head. She sat next to me in silence. We watched a couple struggle with a car seat across the parking lot. Then she spoke. "I saw the slideshow." I nodded. "I wasn't in it." "I know." A long pause. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." She looked at me carefully, then nodded. "I've been your friend a long time, Lynn. If you ever need me to hold space for truth or consequences, just say the word." I reached into my purse, handed her the USB. She took it without a word. "Not yet," I said. "Soon." Marcy slipped it into her clutch, squeezed my hand. Then she stood. "I'll be inside when you're ready." I sat alone a little longer. The breeze picked up. I wrapped my arms around myself. And for the first time that day I smiled. Not for anyone else, not to make peace, but because I knew the silence was almost over, and I would never be erased again. The Monday after the wedding, I packed my things into boxes. Not dramatically, not in a flurry of anger. Just intentionally. Files, bank statements, old flash drives. Every piece of paper I'd ever touched on behalf of our family. I didn't take the lavender dress. I left it folded on the bed with a note that said nothing at all. Downstairs, Mom was humming, cleaning out flower vases. She didn't look up when I wheeled my small suitcase toward the door. "Going somewhere, Marcy's, just for a few days." Her sponge stopped moving. "That's fine, just don't stir anything up, Lynn. Elise's parents are still in town." I opened the door. "Oh, and can you text your brother later?" he said. "You missed brunch yesterday." I didn't miss it, I said without turning. I wasn't invited. The door closed softly behind me. Marcy's guest room had a futon, 2 windows, and the quiet I needed. She brought me tea without asking. Chamomile. Exactly how I like it, no sugar, a thin slice of lemon. "Do you want to talk?" she asked gently. "I want to document." She nodded. and left me alone. I opened the laptop, created a folder on the desktop case, Parker, Family, 2025. Inside I drive opt PDFs of tax files with my initials in the e-sign boxes. Screenshots of text threads from mom requesting financial help. The bank transfers I initiated. Photos of the family home repairs I paid for weekend projects I completed. Then I opened the audio file. Mom's voicemail. Still calm. Still smiling. Still clear. He needs stability, and you'll be fine. I titled it Inheritance Justification, Audio, 2024. Then I created one final document, Chronology of Contributions. Every dollar. Every hour. Everything I'd done for them, line by line. As I worked, I kept the window open. The breeze moved the curtain gently. Outside wind chimes rang. It felt like building a case against gravity. Proving finally that I had not imagined the weight. On Wednesday, I met with Howard again. He reviewed my files silently, one page at a time. Finally, he looked up. This isn't a legal slam dunk, he said. But it's powerful. Especially in the court of opinion. I nodded. We'll start with a demand letter, he continued. Quiet, measured. Fair. And if they ignore it? He smiled. Then we escalate. That afternoon, I emailed my parents. Formally, professionally. I attached the letter from Howard along with a copy of the asset contributions report. I wrote no message. Just the subject line for your review, family asset dispute. 2 hours later, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom. Then Kevin. I didn't answer. The next morning, I received an email. Lynn, this is not necessary. You're acting out of hurt. Let's talk before making a scene. Love, Mom. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed everything. Had it notarized. Made 2 extra copies. One for Howard. One for myself. One for Marcy, just in case. That weekend, Kevin texted, "You're seriously doing this?" Over a house, I stared at the screen for a long time. Then typed back, over being erased. I never hit send, just deleted it. Instead, I forwarded his message to Howard. On Sunday night, I returned to the house, not to reconcile, to retrieve what was mine. I walked through the front door with quiet certainty. Mom was in the living room. Elise is napping, she said. Keep your voice down. I went upstairs, opened the closet, pulled down 2 boxes, photo albums, documents, journals. On my way out, I passed the kitchen. Dad was sitting at the table. He didn't look up. Why are you doing this? He asked flatly. You taught me to be responsible, I said. I'm just following through. He said nothing. Later that night, I sat with Marcy on her patio. She handed me a folder. Inside, names. Women she knew. Contacts she trusted. Therapists. Real estate agents. Community circles for women who'd walked away from toxic families. You're not the only one, she said softly. The cicadas buzzed. The air smelled like cut grass and dry summer stone. I thought justice would feel angrier, I admitted. It doesn't, she replied. It just feels clean. I spent the next week preparing my life for a future I actually chose. I applied for a 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet complex near my office. Signed up for a financial workshop on reclaiming personal assets after family loss. Started attending a Wednesday night group therapy session for adult daughters. We talked about patterns, about guilt, about legacies we never asked to carry. One woman, Janice, said something I'll never forget. The hardest part isn't being treated unfairly, it's realizing they never planned to do better. I wrote that down. Underlined it twice. That night, I updated the folder on my desktop. Changed its name from Case, Parker, Family, 2025 to Closure, Project 1. It was no longer just about what they took. It was about what I had started to reclaim. My voice, my space, my future. Have you ever stayed silent while someone else was handed your place in the story? If you've ever reclaimed your worth quietly or boldly, share it below. Someone else needs to know they're not alone. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more real stories of closure and empowerment. 1 week after sending the demand letter, I received an invitation. A formal envelope. Cream paper, gold foil edges. You are cordially invited to the Parker Whitmore post-wedding celebration and gift opening. Location: Elisa's parents' home. Dress code: semi-formal. Time: Sunday, 3 p.m. I set it on the kitchen counter at Marcy's place. She raised an eyebrow. I didn't know you were back on the guest list. I smiled. Neither did I. That night I stayed up late. Laptop open. Notes scattered. A timeline forming. This wasn't revenge, it was a presentation. First I called Howard. Is there any restriction on me attending a family event while a dispute is active? He chuckled. None at all, as long as you don't yell or throw cake. Noted. Planning to make a point. Only one. Second, I met with a contact from Marcy's list, Tina Ruiz, a family financial advocate and community organizer. She wore corduroy blazers and didn't blink when I told her everything. They've kept you in a functional role, she said. You were the daughter, the assistant, the keeper of records. She tapped the folder I'd brought. This is your exit file, but it can also be your mirror. What do you mean? Sometimes justice isn't showing them what they did, it's showing everyone else what you did and how little they valued it. That stuck with me. On Saturday, I printed a portfolio. Not dramatic. Just factual. Cover page: personal contribution summary, Lynn Parker sections, household services rendered. Financial oversight records. Maintenance receipts. Photographic archive excerpts. Audio transcription. Voicemail: February 2024. No commentary. No embellishment. I included one final page, a notarized statement of my intention to pursue equitable compensation or public acknowledgment. I made 10 copies. Sunday came bright and warm. Marcy offered to drive. I wore navy slacks and a fitted jacket. No dress, no pastel tones. I brought no gift. Only a leather folio in my bag. The Whitmore house was massive. Brick columns. Hydrangeas. A stone fountain. Inside, champagne flutes glimmered under chandeliers. Elise smiled too widely when she saw me. Linny. We weren't sure you'd come. Neither was I said evenly. Kevin came over, glass in hand. Let's just enjoy today, all right. No drama, I smiled. I never bring drama, Kevin. I bring records. His eyes narrowed slightly. I walked past him. The celebration moved to the garden. Tables of gifts. Laughter, toasts. Midway through the opening of presents, Mom stood and clinked her glass. Before we open the final gifts, I just want to say this family is built on support, on loyalty, on the sacrifices we all make for one another. Heads nodded. She gestured to Kevin and Elise. They are the future of this family. And we're so proud to pass that torch forward. Then she looked at me. A single beat. Small, controlled. And of course we thank everyone who's helped along the way. It was a dismissal, wrapped in politeness. I stood up. My chair scraped softly against the stone patio. I'd like to say something, I said clearly. The chatter paused. I walked to the front, opened the folio, and handed out the packets. Elise blinked. Kevin stepped forward. What is this? An inventory, I replied. Of 10 years of contribution. Financial, emotional, physical. People began flipping pages. I watched their expressions shift. Recognition. Embarrassment. Discomfort. Dad was the only one who didn't read. Mom looked pale. I've given, I continued, more than most people in this family care to remember. Not out of obligation. But love. I paused. And I was erased. Silently, efficiently. As if I had no stake. No presence. No weight. The room was hushed. I turned to Kevin. When you accepted the house, you accepted a history you never paid into. And I accepted that quietly. But this gathering is where the erasure ends. I nodded to Marcy, who stood at the back. She opened her purse and held up a small folder. A legal process has started. You'll be hearing from counsel this week. But today is not about that. I turned back to the guests. Today is about context. I let that word sit. Then I walked away. No drama. No tears. Just a woman who had finally changed the narrative. Back at Marcy's, we didn't talk much. She reheated soup. We sat at the table like it was a Tuesday in any other life. Do you feel better? She asked eventually. No, I said. I feel real. That night I slept. No dreams. No clenched jaw. Just quiet. And the beginning of peace. By Tuesday morning, the silence had shifted. Not the kind of silence that comes before something. The kind that follows it. A stillness after impact. Not loud, but heavy. The first message came at 8:14 a.m. From Elise Whitmore Parker. Subject clarification. Re Sunday materials. Lynn, I think we'd all prefer to resolve this privately. Kevin and I weren't involved in any financial decision-making regarding the house. This is between you and your parents. Let's talk soon. Elise. I didn't reply. An hour later, Kevin called. I let it ring out. Then came the second message. From Diane Parker, subject hurtful and unnecessary. Lynn, I'm still in shock. That was not the time or place. You've humiliated this family. We can't change the past, but we can move forward if you stop this now. Please consider what you're doing. Love, Mom. That word again. Love, only used when leverage failed. I deleted the email. Howard called that afternoon. He sounded almost amused. Well, he said you certainly got their attention. Is that good? It's useful. Do I have a real case? In court, it's a stretch. Legally, you weren't entitled unless they put it in writing, but ethically, he exhaled slowly. You've built a devastating picture. And if they care about their standing, they'll respond. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Now he added, we wait. Quietly. Marcy brought home flowers that night, not for a celebration. Just soft white tulips in a glass vase. They felt like you. We ate leftover curry and watched something neither of us paid attention to. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. By Thursday, the ripples had spread. I got a text from my cousin Amanda. Hey. I saw some of the stuff you shared. Just wanted to say, I always wondered why you were never in the photos. You deserved better. Then from Uncle Pete. Just catching up on what happened Sunday. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Then finally from my godmother Nancy, who had moved to Arizona years ago. I'm proud of you. I always knew you held that family together. I'm sorry they made you feel small. I saved every message. Read them again before bed. Let them settle. It didn't undo anything, but it softened the edges. On Friday, Kevin showed up at my office. I saw him through the glass standing stiff in his too expensive jacket. I asked reception to let him wait. 10 minutes. Then 20. When I walked out, he looked startled. Lynn, please. I just want to talk. I folded my arms. Then talk. I didn't know it was that serious. I thought you were just upset. I wasn't upset, I said. I was erased. He shifted. Mom and Dad, they thought they were doing what was right. I didn't ask for the house. But you accepted it. He looked away. I'm getting dragged into this now. Elise's parents are asking questions. People at the office my boss heard. I stayed silent. They think I stole from you. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't steal, Kevin. You just stood there while someone handed you something that wasn't theirs to give. He rubbed his face. What do you want? It was the first honest thing he'd said. I took a breath. I want you to acknowledge it. Publicly. And I want our parents to do the same. No excuses. No, but you were always fine. He didn't answer. I walked past him. Tell them they have until next Friday to respond to the letter. Or we escalate. That weekend, I visited the house one last time. Not to fight. To see it clearly. Without sentiment, the porch paint was still peeling. The curtains in the dining room were newer Elise's taste. The front door stuck slightly when I pushed it open. Mom was in the kitchen. She turned when she heard me. "Lynn, just here to collect the last box," I said. We stood there. Not mother and daughter. Just two women who had long since stopped seeing each other. She looked tired. "You've made your point." "No," I said. "I've made mine visible." I picked up the box by the stairs. It held the last of my journals. A photo of Dad and me from when I was 10. The watch he gave me on my 21st birthday. "Kevin's not strong enough for all this," she said quietly. "Then you shouldn't have given him what he couldn't carry." She didn't respond. At the door I paused. "There's still time to make this right." She nodded. But I didn't believe her. That night, I filed a formal complaint with the Family Attorneys Board, not to ruin reputations, to make a record. I also sent a brief press packet to a local nonprofit blog that featured women's financial justice stories. They replied 2 days later. "We'd love to feature you." I gave them the documents, the facts, the photos. No names, just initials. The headline read, "The Cost of Being the Responsible Daughter." It was shared 22,000 times in 48 hours. I stayed off social media. But I received 3 letters in the mail from strangers. One from a woman in Kansas who'd given her inheritance to a brother she barely spoke to. One from a woman in Maine who never got a thank you after raising her siblings. One from a widow in California who wrote, "They forgot me too. Thank you for reminding me I exist." I cried. Not from pain, from release. The silence had broken, and I was still standing. 1 month later, a letter arrived. Heavy paper, cream envelope. Typed neatly. Signed by both of my parents. No handwritten note, no apology. But still something. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before opening it. The apartment was quiet. Only the ticking of the clock and the low hum of the fridge. I hadn't expected a letter. Not after the last conversation with my mother, if it could even be called that. But there it was, formal, folded, undeniable. It read, "We acknowledge the contributions you made to our household and family finances over the past decade. We regret any actions that may have caused you pain or diminished your efforts. Going forward, we will not dispute your request for compensation and public clarification." I read it 3 times. Each time slower. Not because I didn't understand, but because something in me needed to believe it was real. It was cold, measured, devoid of warmth. But it was in writing. Howard called it a moral concession without legal admission. I called it overdue. Kevin never responded. Not a word. Not a message. Not even a secondhand update through relatives. Amanda told me she saw Elise at the grocery store clutching her phone like it was about to explode. She said, "Your sister-in-law's name makes people whisper now." I didn't gloat. I just nodded. Let the silence speak where noise used to pretend. By April, I'd signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment on the north side of Spokane. It had clean floors, big windows, and a kitchen I chose every tile for. I bought myself a full-length mirror. Something I hadn't owned in years. In my family's house, there were mirrors. But they never reflected back me. The 2nd bedroom became a writing room. Not an office. A space for thinking, remembering, naming things I used to skip past. Marcy called it the room of record. She came by with a warm throw blanket and a small indoor plant I named Joe. Joe sits by the window now, soaking in the sun without apology. That's what I try to do too. I joined a financial justice group for women. Every Wednesday night, we met at a community center with flickering fluorescent lights and mismatched chairs. We shared what was taken, what was dismissed, what we rebuilt. There was no bitterness. Only clarity. One woman, Naomi, said something that still echoes in my bones. "They raised us to carry the weight and then asked us why we walked so slow." Everyone in the room went still, and then we exhaled together. In late May, I was asked to speak at the local library. The topic was invisible labor in caregiving daughters. I wore a navy blouse, dark jeans, and the silver earrings I bought for myself when I got my first tax refund at 23. I spoke for 15 minutes. My hands only shook a little. Afterward, a woman mid-50s, gray streak in her ponytail, came up to me with tears in her eyes. "You told my story," she said quietly, "and you didn't even know me." I looked her in the eyes. "No one ever forgets how they were made to feel small," I replied. "But we get to decide when it stops." She hugged me. And I let her. Mother's Day arrived on a Sunday filled with rain. I made pancakes for myself. Added blueberries. Used real maple syrup. At 9:12 a.m., a text came in. I saw the article. "I don't know how we got here. I hope someday we can come back." It was from Mom. I stared at the screen. The little dots hovered, then disappeared. I let it sit 2 days, no rush. Then I typed, "I'm building something new." If you want to visit that world, you'll have to knock first. No emoji, no follow-up, and no guilt. Summer crept in quietly. Longer days, open windows. I started waking earlier, brewing coffee with cinnamon. Not because anyone else liked it, just because I did. I took walks by the river trail. Watched kids ride their bikes and dogs tug against leashes. Sometimes I'd bring a journal. Write a sentence or two. Not about the past, just about the air, the light, the smell of the pine trees when the sun hit just right. That too felt like healing. Marcy and I sat on a bench one warm evening. The sky was streaked with orange and pale pink. She asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought for a long while. My answer came slowly. "I regret not doing it sooner," I said. "But I think I had to become the version of me that could survive the truth." Marcy nodded. "That's not weakness. That's maturity." We sat in silence. The wind picked up slightly. And I knew with a peace I hadn't felt in years she was right. One day I received a letter, handwritten, postmarked from Oregon. Inside, "You didn't burn bridges, you just stopped building them by yourself. Thank you for showing us that healing doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be yours." I placed the letter in a folder labeled "Things Worth Keeping." Sometimes justice doesn't look like courtroom drama or confessions in tears. It looks like a woman sipping coffee in the morning from a mug she bought for herself. It looks like choosing your own tiles, your own light bulbs, your own peace. It looks like walking past a family photo that no longer wounds you, or smiling at a younger version of yourself in an old picture and whispering, "You made it." The mug I drink from now says, "She remembered who she was, and the world adjusted." I didn't scream. I didn't fight dirty. I just remembered. And that was enough. Have you ever had to rebuild a life others believed you didn't deserve? Have you carried the quiet weight of being the responsible one while others took the credit? If you've ever chosen dignity over noise, I see you. And I'd love to hear your story below. You are not alone. Every ending can be a beginning, especially when you write it yourself. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more real stories of closure, healing, and quiet empowerment after 40.